What is the evidence that we are getting more allergic to stuff?
The research does show that, we are getting more allergic to things, unfortunately. And essentially, these are some of the broad factors, okay?
Having these 50 plus allergies impact my life every single day. For starters, I have to constantly have the fear that anything I can eat can make me react and become allergic to.
I'm Hannah Gelbart and I'm here with Frances Mao, a BBC journalist, and we're talking about allergies because it seems that people are getting more and more allergic to stuff. Or are we just more aware of it? Well, today you're going to hear why allergies are becoming more common, and we're going to look at some of these new treatments that are being trialled around the world. What actually is an allergy and what causes your body to react in those quite extreme ways sometimes?
What makes an allergy as opposed to an intolerance is that your immune system, for whatever reason, has recognized it to be a harm. So the first time that you've been exposed to this, your immune system has actually triggered, and I'm not going to go into the biological, sciencey, chemical things, so I'll likely get that wrong. But essentially, it's triggered these cells that have then instructed your body to create these antibodies to fight this threat. And so those agents, if we go with that, they stick in your body. And then the next time you're exposed to that threatening thing again, they go and attack it. And that creates, things like welts on your body, a rash, lower blood pressure. You might start to have difficulty breathing. Those are the sort of things that we see from like an allergy attack or a really extreme allergy reaction. And if untreated, that can obviously really be quite actually life-threatening.
Is it like a malfunction of your immune system? Because you say it's a perceived threat, like peanuts aren't really going to kill you, but your body thinks that they are really, really dangerous. So it's going to put up all of its defenses to make sure that they don't attack you. Is that what's going on?
Exactly. So like as researchers I spoke to told me, it's your immune system actually going wrong. Like your immune system is recognizing something is wrong, but that's a mistake that your immune system's making. Yeah.
Which are some of the more common allergies globally?
Yeah, so obviously, you just mentioned peanuts, and food allergies are obviously one that, we talked about restaurants. That's kind of like the most prominent, common, everyday allergy that people have. However, the most common allergy really is respiratory allergies, so pollen. So that is, being allergic to things like grass or dust or, other things in the atmosphere. And it also affects something like 400 million people worldwide. Yes. So obviously that's a huge burden on just healthcare systems everywhere, and also kind of hard to contain and manage, right? Because
Totally.
It's the environment that you're in.
Yeah, you can choose what you want to eat and what you don't want to eat in a restaurant, but you can't really choose the
Yeah.
air you're breathing.
Yeah.
Or should we say, there are things that you can do like wear a mask and stuff, but it's a lot harder.
Absolutely.
Frances, you're from Australia, which has been called the allergy capital of the world. Is it like super obvious? What's it like when you go out to a restaurant?
In Australia's termed the allergy capital of the world because due to the research and the data, that shows that almost 1 in 10 infants, so 10% of early childhood and babies have marked a allergy. And often that's a food allergy or a respiratory allergy, but that's a really high percentage. And that does drop off once they're a bit older, around, like age 6 or so, it goes down to about 6%, and then as an adult, it goes down to like 3%. So I think that's where that term comes from. So you wouldn't really see it out at restaurants. I don't think that hay fever rates, among the general adult population are necessarily much higher than the rest of the world. But certainly when it comes to marking allergies in infants, Australia does have a particularly high rate.
What is the evidence that we are getting more allergic to stuff?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the research does show that, we are getting more allergic to things, unfortunately. And there are a few different factors, and we're still grappling with what the exact factors are. And we're still, the researchers and scientists are still doing a range of, specific data sets and surveys to identify this. But essentially, these are some of the broad factors. Okay, so increasing urbanization. So, as certainly in many like Western developed countries, like more people live in cities, they're away from like kind of more rural, regional areas where they might have been kind of like more exposed to, I guess, in like less built up environments.
So we're not rolling around in the mud anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Not as much as we used to.
Actually, yeah, sort of like we're not, no dirt. Less dirt, different type of dirt.
We're too clean.
Different type of dirt. Clean is another bit. So like there's also the hygiene hypothesis.
Right.
We are just in a more clean society. But does that also mean, and it seems so, that, infants, when you're first exposed to that, or they're being less exposed to that microbiome, which has, good bacteria. So that is also one of the factors. But then also lifestyle factors, things like diet, changing diets. And the other thing which is really interesting too, and not to kind of drill into the niche of it, but, we're a more global society too, right? So people live in different environments to the ones, not only that they were born in, but also the ones which, perhaps their genetic predisposition is used to. And to go back to what I was saying, right, like the most common allergy is, pollen and respiratory, and that is really tied to that research has found to the environment. So sometimes it's like what your heritage is or what your genetic predisposition, it's not super suited to the environment in which your family may have moved to. And you can see that actually in some of the studies in Australia where, really interestingly enough, babies and kids who are born in Australia but come from, say, countries in Asia, they have a higher rate of allergies than kids from Caucasian backgrounds in Australia or Indigenous backgrounds in Australia. However, the same research found that kids who were born in Asia and spent their first few years in Asia and then moved to Australia, they don't have the same higher rates.
I think it's Australia.
Yeah.
I would say it's Australia.
Yeah, it could be Australia too. Really interesting allergy in Australia, very common in the southern states, is an allergy where there's a lot of allergic reaction actually to this ant called the jumping jack ant or the jack jumper ant. That's a big problem. Like,
really?
Yes.
What kind of reaction does it cause, this jumping?
So similar to like a bee or like wasp reaction. Yes. And that's definitely an Australia problem.
Yeah. So Frances, what is it about Australia in particular that is making people more allergic? Is it particularly clean? Are there just no germs there?
I don't think it's a case of, there being fewer germs. And, again, referring to what I was saying earlier about there being different environmental factors. One thing that, researchers have identified is certainly, the levels of vitamin D. And there's, some theories and, there's some suggestions from some of the research that just, being less exposed to the sun, we're more inside as a culture and societies, and just not receiving as much sunlight, that could be linked to kind of higher rates of allergies for some allergies. But similarly, there was also this one particular study which seemed to indicate a link between vitamin D levels to peanut allergies in particular. Keeping
with this, like, why are we getting more allergic to stuff? Are allergies getting more severe? Are there more allergies, or are we just more aware of it?
Sure, yes. Like, there is a slight factor is, yes, as societies, we are more aware of allergies and intolerances, and so we're reporting and recording this more. However, the weight of the research and evidence does show that due to those factors I've outlined earlier, where it's different environments, we're more clean as a society, there's more sterilization going on. Not only are we reporting more allergies, but unfortunately, allergies are getting worse too. And we can't actually pinpoint the one factor or the one reason why.
And having an allergy can be really, really serious, even fatal, as you say. So now let's hear from someone who is suffering from various allergies. This is Mia, and she's from the US.
I live with over 50 food allergies, and I've had these allergies my entire life. My 50 plus allergies include all nuts and their oils, all seeds except for sunflower seed oil, and also all seed oils except for sunflower seed oil. I'm allergic to eggs unless it's cooked in a cake. That's the only form I can have it in right now. Any other form I can go into a life-threatening reaction. Dairy, I'm allergic to dairy completely. I'm allergic to all fish except for cooked tuna and cooked codfish. I'm allergic to all shellfish. And having these 50 plus allergies impacts my life every single day. For starters, I have to constantly have the fear that anything I can eat can make me react and become allergic to. So constantly living in fear is something that I experience on a daily basis. In addition to that, anything that the average person has to do, I do that too, but always adding allergies into that mix. So when it comes to going to restaurants, having to call ahead of time, talk to the manager, talk to the chef, make sure that the restaurant can accommodate me, that they can make me something safe, and use protocols to prevent any sort of risk of any allergens touching my dish. When it comes to socializing, it can be kind of hard sometimes because I want to make sure that my friends don't feel inconvenienced or feel like I'm being a burden. So, you know, when it comes to going out to dinner with my friends usually let me pick the restaurant, and I do have a list of restaurants that I usually go to. For example, I go to school in New York City, so I have a list of 10 restaurants that I usually find like good and are safe and accommodating. In addition to that, when it comes to going out to parties and functions, I usually either bring my own safe food, or I will either eat before or after the event, because most of the time when we go to an event or a party, there's not really any safe options for me. It's not easy to have these allergies. You know, while I try to put online my positive experiences that I do have, I also will show the parts that aren't positive, that are really hard. You know, I constantly live in fear and am very anxious a lot of the time when I eat out, and you know, I think that having allergies is very emotionally taxing.
Frances, there have been some really tragic cases of children and young people who have died from allergies, sesame seeds, peanuts. What can be done to try to mitigate that risk?
The advice always is, once diagnosed, is obviously, just to keep that, whether it's an EpiPen or whatever, like adrenaline-based form, to try and combat those symptoms you may be having if you are triggered into attack. To kind of always have that on you and around you, and also obviously to try and avoid that food. But, it's not the perfect solution, right? And I was, in my research on this and talking to a lot of the doctors and scientists, part of the reason why they're doing so much research into how to tackle allergies, because this isn't a new phenomenon either, is, it's dismaying for them to only advise people or to only advise parents when they're telling, them that, your child has this, predisposition to this allergy. It's a bit dismaying to be like, hey, all you can do is avoid this food for the rest of your life, and carry that around with you.
There are also these really interesting pioneering treatments that are coming out of Australia that might be able to help our bodies prepare not to have allergic reactions in the first place. I read about one that's kind of like peanut butter therapy.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and they've done a lot of work on it the past year or 2 years in kind of rolling out in a national trial. It's been led by the Murdoch Children Research Institute, which is a very pioneering children's research body based in Melbourne in Australia. And essentially, it's basically a form of immunotherapy. There's been a lot of willingness from parents wanting to participate in this trial, which essentially is identifying babies or infants very early on. I think it starts around 12 weeks actually, who do have this allergy to peanuts, and then in a very formulated, careful way, they're having small dosages of peanut dust or peanut powder administered to them, and it's just kind of slowly introducing peanut to them, and that can increase those dosages over weeks.
This is so interesting. Yeah. So instead of avoiding the allergen, it's how do we get your body used to it little by little?
Exactly. Yeah. So they're directly introducing it to the infants. Obviously, huge caveat. this is definitely a don't do it at home sort of thing.
Because if it goes wrong.
Absolutely. And there have been some, from me speaking to the researchers at this institute, there have been some reactions, both in hospital settings and at home from the people who've been tested. However, and it's early days, but the results so far have shown kind of promising.
Well, we will watch the space and see what the outcome of these trials are, because it could be potentially life-changing for people with allergies.
Absolutely.
Frances, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you for listening. I'm Hannah Gelbart. This is What in the World from the BBC World Service, and we'll be back with another episode soon. See you then. Bye.